Hello, hi, Susan. Hello, can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Like I said, we're just coming back from a demonstration, so I'm going to be talking to you guys from the car. My friend is driving. I hope that's okay.
It's perfect. We take every minute we can get, and we're super grateful and thankful for you joining us. So tell us, my first question when we were also preparing, I prepared a little bit of presentation while we were waiting for you. This is the book in Slovenian. It's nice. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah.
I'm sure that if you want and have some space on the bookshelves at home, we can send one also to you. And so my first question would be, in these days, with everything that's happening also in Palestine, we've seen also bombings by the Israeli army in Dženinu. Does the book have an echo? Or given that you have written already 2 other books and a poetry collection, does Mornings in Dženinu or David's Scar still somehow come alive in these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think people around the world sort of intuitively recognize that they're being lied to, or they're not getting the full story. I think most discerning people in the world, recognize when a whole population is being demonized wholesale and spoken about in animalistic, animals or beasts or cockroaches and all the things in the highest offices have said about us. And so people turn to literature, they turn to other sources. And so, yes, there's definitely a reverberation and a need and a call for more Palestinian literature. It's a terrible and sad reality that, yes, there is a spike in book orders, not just myself, but also other Palestinian writers, because I think people are hungry to know more and people recognize that they're being lied to.
And you're very vocal in explaining the situation and the reality, and that we also cannot forget the story of, or the history of Nakba, the fact that we're not talking about a conflict because the sides are not equal. We're talking about the occupation and siege that has been going on now for decades. So how do you feel, I mean, how dangerous do you feel is still, because now we have heard Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, saying that the UN will learn their lesson because the general secretary actually said that what happened on the 7th of October has a history and we should somehow understand the wider context. How important is literature in this humanizing of people?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I was saying that I didn't hear everything you said because we broke up a little bit, but I want to say something about that word humanizing. It's used a lot, but I think we have to really think about it, because what does it mean to humanize people? In other words, what does it say about what we were before somebody read something we wrote and then suddenly saw us as human beings? So to be so dehumanized and so denigrated in popular imagination that people feel like there's a need to humanize us, that itself is a statement. I have people saying sometimes over the years who have said that very same thing to me, and also have commented things like how amazed they are that my characters are different from each other. Like, for example, in my second novel, where there was a cast of women in Gaza, a reporter asked me once, how did you manage to make them so different from each other? So, like, there is this undercurrent, this very racist undercurrent in how in the bias against Palestinians. We are not seen as fully human in popular imagination throughout the West in particular. On the right, of course, viewed as, you know, terrorists, crazy, irrational, dark people. And then that's on the right, and then on the left, we are seen as these, you know, pitiful refugees, hungry, oppressed, and also people with like a mythical power to endure what no human being should have to endure. So I think, you know, literature is a landscape where all of us can meet each other as human beings and recognize ourselves in each other, and recognize the pain, you know, the love in families, recognize the pain of loss, recognize friendships and laughter and humor and scandal and you know, animosities and human relationships. So I think this is the power of culture and art, and it's one of the reasons why Zionists around the world are so intent on shutting us down. We had a very simple literature festival in Philadelphia about a month ago. It was an extraordinary, beautiful moment of indigenous agency, where Palestinian writers from around the world, and from all parts of Palestine and our diaspora and refugee camps. It was a moment where we got to be together to celebrate our ancestors and our culture, celebrate each other and our children. And we were attacked mercilessly. Zionists even they tried to shut us down. They tried to get funding withdrawn. They drove a racist billboard around, a digital billboard that, you know, depicted us as, like, they called us Nazis, jihadis, genocider. I mean, just really horrible things. But this is, you know, it was terrifying in the moment, of course, because they're literally inciting violence against us. But when you stop to think about why are they doing that, it's easy to see that they are afraid of the power of culture. They're afraid of our voice. They're afraid of our humanity, of our literature. And so, yes, I mean, I don't like to use the word humanize, but I do understand what you're saying. So I just wanted to sort of clarify that.
Okay. I'll go a little bit back. I mentioned before that when you were between, I think, 8 and 10, you were in orphanage in Jerusalem, right? That's where you grew up. And I'm wondering whether you still have any memories of that, or I read that in 2018, Israel hasn't allowed you to go to Palestine. And I'm wondering how Palestine has changed from what you remember as a child, in a childhood that wasn't easy, to until now. You were also in Gaza, I think, in 2013. So yeah.
So I lived in the Jerusalem orphanage from the age of 10 to 13. I remember it very well, in fact, and I still have friends that I went to, you know, that I lived with there and went to school with. And as a matter of fact, in my first novel, Mornings in Dženinu, there's a chapter called The Orphanage, where I put the characters in my life there. And so most of that chapter is autobiographical, actually. The Jerusalem of my past and my childhood is extremely different than it is now. For one thing, there was, you know, Jerusalem was still open to the rest of Palestine. Like, we could go from Jerusalem to Nablus, from Nablus to Jerusalem. There were buses and things like that. I mean, there was a lot of violence and discrimination, but, you know, Palestinians weren't banned from entering Jerusalem as they are now. And there were still a lot of green hills and fabled places around Jerusalem that where we could go, you know, hiking, look over that beautiful fabled city of our ancestors. And but But one of their biggest priorities of this colonial project has been to remove Palestinians from in and around Jerusalem and replace them with Jewish people from all over the world. And so part of that project has been to build as many high-rise apartments and settlements in and around Jerusalem to basically sort of surround Jerusalem with Jewish-only colonies that would, number one, prevent Palestinian, life and expansion in Jerusalem in general from Palestinians in the West Bank and other towns and villages. So Jerusalem is kind of off limits to the vast majority of Palestinians who live in Palestine, and it certainly wasn't that way when I was younger. And of course, now I'm completely, even as an American citizen, I can't even go as a visitor. And this is something they do to a lot of people who are, outspoken around the world.
And because in the book, it seems we could see many autobiographical, somehow lines or parallels, but at the same time, it's also clear that it's a work of fiction that has, background and experience, but is extremely powerful, probably also just because you are such a great novelist as well and author. And I'm wondering, do you get any responses also from Israel? Was the book translated into Hebrew in Palestine? Because I remember that, for example, Radosh Hadeh, he says that his books are not read widely in Palestine. Is it different for you?
So my books are, they are actually, I think, Radosh Hadeh writes more of memoirs, and to my knowledge, he hasn't written fiction. So we have very different genres. But my books are translated into Arabic and are widely read in Palestine. And frankly, I mean, my latest one is not, just because there were some issues that happened with the translation, but it's in the works. But honestly, Palestinian readers are my most important readership to me. And in particular, Palestinian women and young Palestinian women. I mean, that's, I don't really write for a particular audience. I never write for thinking about who my audience is. I just really write to tell a truthful story, to tell a story with authenticity. And so my principal loyalty is to my characters. Always. It's my only loyalty, actually, is to the characters. But because the characters are Palestinian, so I suppose I write for Palestinians, and not really, although, it's like all writers, we write to create art for the sake of art, for the sake of narrative, for the importance and the beauty of storytelling. I mean, every society has a tradition, has some kind of literary storytelling tradition, and it's because it's so fundamental to our being, to our spiritual existence in the world, our existence as living sentient beings with memories and roots and traditions and stories. We are composed of our stories, both as individuals and as collectives, as societies and groups.
Now, your last book has in the title Loveless World, and if we look at the present situation, there are many words we can describe it with, and Loveless World is for sure one of them, also the present situation. Yet it seems you don't lose hope. I mean, I'm wondering, do you feel that Palestine as one can still live given all the injustices and all the barriers we see set? Or do you feel that what you do with the work for Playgrounds for Palestine, but also Palestine Rights, your novel. Can this breach the barriers that have been built? Yeah.
So, you know, I am a student of history, and I know that, you know, I know that history is a long arc, and sometimes what we strive for may not happen in our own lifetime. So you know, being a student of history and of revolutionary movements around the world, I know that there is always hope, and there's always something. As long as we're alive, there is hope. There's always hope, and I don't think that, despite the barriers that are placed around us, despite the terrible things that are said about us, despite the fact that we have literally the world's greatest powers lined up against our indigenous defenseless society. I mean, these are all like extraordinary odds. I still think there's hope. I mean, you know, I look to moments of history. I look to the Haitian Revolution. I look to the Algerian Revolution. I look to Malcolm X, to the Black Panthers. I look to Black liberation movements around the world. I look to Nelson Mandela. I look to all of these moments in history where, you know, even abolition in this country, you know, a lot of people who fought enslavement maybe knew it wouldn't happen in their lifetime, right? But you struggle understanding the arc of history bends toward justice, as Martin Luther King said. So, I mean, I'm a writer, and I believe in the power and the beauty of the written word. I believe in the power and the beauty of art and music and culture. I believe in you know, in the fundamental humanity and love that is required to produce art. And you know, I am also a political activist and a human rights activist and an animal rights activist. And all of these things are intertwined, and they're not separate from each other for me.
Okay. I would have one more question, and then if it's okay for you, I would also ask some of the audience if they have any questions.
Sure.
I would be interested what you have just said, if I will remember, because I lost the red line now. Okay, does the audience have any questions? I know I wrote it down also as one of the points. Any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Hello, thank you for this wonderful talk. In your view, given what is happening now, do you think there still is a political solution to this injustice for the Palestinians?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that very well. Could you repeat it?
Okay. Do you think that, given what is happening now, in your view, is there still room for a political solution of what is happening?
Is there room for a political solution? You know, it's interesting because, you know, this kind of language was never posed to Black South Africans, for example. Nobody ever said, you know, do you think there's room for a political solution instead of continuing to struggle for freedom? Or, you know, there's so many instances in history of oppression and colonization, and this question seems to only come to Palestinians for some reason. You know, it's it still baffles me that people still think in these terms after, you know, decades of us being asked and complying with international requests to negotiate with the people who are literally destroying our society and erasing us. You know, there can be no negotiation between an occupied and an occupier. But we still did it, and we still tried. And Israel kept stealing more and more land. They kept kicking more and more people out. They kept building checkpoints. They kept building settlements. They kept, you know, doing night raids and grabbing our children in the middle of the night and hauling them off to prisons. They keep doing it, and they don't stop. And every time they get more bold, every time they get more violent, every time they get more brutal. And so no, I don't see a political solution. The only way this is going to stop is, one, either they completely annihilate us and genocide us and or expel us from our homeland, or what little remains to us, or the international community stands up to Israel. Period. As they do to everyone who does the things that they do. But the fact is that Israel is kind of the linchpin of global empire. Israel is the thing that the ruling class across the globe are hanging on to tooth and nail as Europe's last settler colonial hurrah in the world. It is the linchpin of their power. Because if it falls, if this colonial project, this settler colonial ethno-religious supremacist state that is predicated on our destruction, if it succeeds, we all lose. And so, you know, we will continue to fight for our freedom. We will continue to raise our voices, and we will continue, despite all the odds, despite having a nuclear armed foe, despite the world's remaining superpower backing them up, and European states, you know, cheering on this genocide, we will continue to rise up, because it is the most basic human impulse to do that, to not accept shackles and not accept chains and not accept inferior status in our homeland. So this is a fact of human nature. And I will also say this, that if you look, and I think people of the world, the masses, recognize that, which is why every major city in the world and in this country has seen masses turn up for Palestine in the streets. And the people who are supporting Israel are all part of the ruling class. You will never see masses of people of such diverse backgrounds, economically diverse backgrounds, racially diverse, ethnically diverse backgrounds showing up in the streets for Palestine. And it is because most people, especially people who have themselves experienced systematic oppression or colonization, they recognize themselves in us. And that's the fact. And so we are not completely without power. We have the power and the moral capital of indigenous people who have been fighting for our very existence for 80 years. We have the power of people of conscience and free people around the world. And that is no small power. Even though we don't have the money, we don't have the political clout, we don't have the organized just voices, and we don't have a military, and we don't have real a real way to defend ourselves against their military junk.
I remembered my question. You mentioned before already, and you were, even when Mornings in Dženinu came out, there were intellectuals who, you know, said that this is an anti-Semitic work, and you also in your work now you face this casting of blame that actually makes anti-Semitism totally without worth, because it devalues it, since it says just that, you can't use any kind of criticism, even against Israel, that already that is anti-Semitism per se, although anti-Semitism, like anti-Islam sentiments, are a problem. How do you stand up against that? Because the fact is, you're not Jewish, you can't be called self-hating Jew, you're Palestinian, you carry all the weight that this has. So yeah, how do you keep going? We hear about, talks being cancelled, people being cancelled, not given positions at the university. So yeah, what has your experience been, and how to keep this struggle? Yeah.
So I am completely marginalized in literary communities for the most part in the West. And my books have been successful by sheer word of mouth, because of readers. But like, I have not I don't get the kinds of reviews or the award submissions or anything like that that happen in literary circles. We do get canceled. We all get canceled. We all get demonized. We all get called anti-Semites. And frankly, this is, again, this is the power of literature. And, how do I go on? Like, it's kind of like, how do I not go on? How can I look at, young children in Palestine who confront tanks with their little bodies, and then for me to be afraid? I would be ashamed to be afraid looking at that, at what they are putting on the line. So, I am lucky and I'm privileged that I have, that I have a platform, however small it might be. But I don't feel the fear. I mean, I think, what can they do to me? They can take my house. Well, they have already done that. They have already taken everything my family owns. They can take my life. Well, I will live on through my words. It's not, so we are not afraid. Palestinians are not afraid, because it is that bad at this point. It is that bad for us.
Any questions from the audience? No? Okay, then I will continue, but we will be really happy if you have any questions. Still, how do you keep contact, or how difficult is it for you at the moment to keep contact with the people in Palestine? We have here Palestinians who talk about, being afraid going out because they might get bad news about what's happening to their families, or what has happened to their families in Gaza. Being happy just to get an SMS or a message, we're okay. How difficult is it for you? Yeah, how do you keep contact?
I mean, we have lost contact with a lot of people, because people are without electricity and without internet, but some people still have it. And we check in daily with the people I know. And of course, we're living by, messages on TikTok and messages on Telegram. And, it's just like, I get up in the middle of the night and scroll through to see if there's any news, or a lot of us are in this space of, on the one hand, we're doing everything we can do, and on the other hand, we're powerless to stop this genocide. So it's absolutely horrendous. Like, you cannot fathom the, watching people getting slaughtered, literally. Like, it's just one baby after another, after another, after another. And then here, all these powerful people cheer it on. The level of denigration and trivialization of our lives is so profound. And it is hard to live with, and it is hard to be in this country. And I think every day that I have to leave, honestly, because it feels evil. It really does. I cannot imagine looking at dead babies over and over and thinking, oh, we need more. I don't understand it, and I will never understand it. And it feels like, you know, you start to feel like really alone in the world. And you know, then, which is why, you know, we have these rallies and we have these demonstrations and we have these gatherings so we can be with each other, because you know, a lot of young people, Palestinian young people in this country, are terrified, but they're still showing up. And which is why I'm in the car. You know, I need to show up for them too, because they are at risk. I'm an old lady, you know, I have had my, you know, I've had children and I've had a career, but they are just starting their lives. And I do feel compelled to show up for them. And everybody is doing what they can, but it is, you know, it's mind-blowing. It is beyond mind-blowing. I mean, I don't even know I don't have words for it. And I am a merchant of words, and I don't have words to express how deeply betrayed, but also not just the betrayal, but on the other hand, in a way, it's like, okay, everything is open now. Everything is revealed. You will never be able to. We saw how you reacted to Ukraine, and we see how you react now. And we understand that there is nothing we can do, nothing we can say that will make the West look at us as human beings. There is nothing. They are not our friends. They will always hold our lives in contempt, and period. So, you know, that's and I, you know, when I say that, I refer to governments, because I think the masses of people around the world are those who take the time to educate themselves, and to look beyond what Western mainstream media is feeding them. I think those people, those masses, are solidly in our corner.
You mentioned before that, you know, you feel that the life is not worth anything, that they feel they can, you know, do whatever they wish. Some people talk about necropolitics. Do you feel that in America or in Europe, are people afraid that, you know, what is now, or what's happening now to Palestinians, this can also happen to them? I mean, how can we build, or how can we somehow bridge this fear to an understanding that that actually solidarity and standing up is the only way, that we cannot, you know, hope to be more close to those with power, that they will not treat us as badly as they treat at the moment the people in Gaza?
Yeah, I mean, this is the point I was trying to make, and this is the point that I was trying to make even at the rally that I was just at for the students. You know, one of the things I said to them is that, you know, there are people in the world who oppose us, who have the power to shut off water and fuel and medicine and food, going to millions of people. They have the power to make journalists around the world repeat everything they say, no matter how outrageous, and no matter the fact that they're caught repeatedly lying, right? People who have the power to fleece the American taxpayers for billions of dollars every year, and anytime they ask it, when millions of Americans can't even afford basic medicines like insulin, and schools are crumbling, and there is tremendous social injustice in this country. The people who have that power, despite all that power, and they have also, like, they have the power to make all of these, sorry, there's a big truck passing. These people have the power to make major US corporations. There's a list of like over 200 or 300 corporations in this country: Amazon, Google, Facebook, Meta, American Airlines, Alaskan Airlines, Bloomberg, I mean, Apple. The list goes on and on of all these corporations who have issued statements in support of Israel. These are American corporations who don't even issue statements when Americans are murdered anywhere in the world. They didn't issue statements during 9/11, but they're issuing statements now for Israel, and that is the power. That is the power of Zionism around the world. And despite all that power, despite the extraordinary funding, despite the extraordinary political and social and economic power that they are still ganging up on college students. They are still doxing and intimidating and trying to silence college students because they are terrified of the truth, because they are terrified of people, young people in particular, taking to the streets and speaking truth to power. Colonizers are always afraid of indigenous agency because they don't have a compelling argument to support their colonial position. They don't have a moral argument against an indigenous people struggle for liberation. How do you argue against that? They cannot. And so what they do is they launch these smear campaigns, calling us anti-Semites, etc., etc. I mean, just doing anything they can to malign us, to silence us. They have all kinds of highly funded networks and programs to basically to scour, to they work on college campuses to gather information about any student, any faculty, any administrator who expresses an iota of solidarity with the Palestinians, and then they smear them. I don't know if you're familiar with the term doxing, but they dox them, which is they dox them. And there have been a lot of students recently who are losing job offers that they had. There's faculty, people are getting fired. People are having their visas rescinded, all for expressing solidarity with Palestinians. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Do you feel that the Palestinian struggle is spreading? Because this is something, it seems that with BDS, and especially on campuses at the universities, even in America, that this is growing even more than in Europe. Is this an actual reality, or is this just an impression we get from the other side of the Atlantic?
I think it's real because there are, surveys are done in this country showing a growing solidarity with Palestinians. And it happens mostly with young people who are technologically savvy and are able to access information that people maybe of my generation, or, what people who are, I guess they're called non-digital natives, who basically didn't grow up with technology, are who don't know how to access raw information, are still subject to the information gatekeeping of mainstream media, etc. Those are, those folks still believe that American media, American journalism is a free press or whatever. And so it's mostly the younger generation that is able to see through these veils and who are more politically sophisticated than I was at that age, for sure.
Any questions from the audience? No? I would also just like to ask you, I remember almond trees, and I know that, well, at least in one of the interviews, they also talked about trees as something that is very important to Palestinians, and we hear now about olive groves and olive trees being destroyed by the illegal Israeli settlers. Is there something that somehow inhabits or somehow has everything in it or represents Palestine to you? or somehow the story that you carry?
There is no one Palestinian story. I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, it's part of everything that I am. It's part of everything that every Palestinian is. It's it's the lullabies people sang to me when I was a young child. It was, sitting around with my grandmother and aunties and learning how to roll grape leaves. I mean, it's songs, it's music, it's dancing, it's it's trees, it's traditions, it's foraging for wild za'atar and akub, the way our ancestors did for millennia. It's all of those things. There is no one thing. Palestine is not one thing. Palestine is one of the most ancient and fabled. It is many things. We are Palestinians. We are people of many religions. We are Jews and Christians and Muslims. We were people who came from other countries and settled in Palestine, but maintained their identity. Armenian Palestinians, the Ugandan Palestinians. I mean, they all came to Palestine and settled over centuries. They that way. And the irony is that, Western world, but in fact, what they're doing in Palestine is completely destroying that indigenous society that was already all of those things and replacing it with a chauvinistic, exclusive society. So yeah, that's a long answer to tell you that it's not one thing, it's many things. It's a whole of foods and all of that.
Yeah, but that sounds also like I don't know, an answer that we should keep in mind, also thinking about either us or the world or any small group that actually has all the diversity in it and that we like to forget. At this point, if there are no questions, I will actually just say thank you so much for taking time, given everything that's happening. And also we will try to, I'm sure that the book also here will spread from one hand to the next, and word of mouth will basically get it to more people than there are copies at the moment, but we always hope for more. Do you feel any last thoughts that you would like to contribute, or that you feel, I don't know, is worth sharing, how to connect, how to spread the word if someone wants to somehow contribute to the joint struggle for freedom of every human being?
I mean, I think, first of all, I want to thank you for having me and for producing this book, for readers who read in Slovenian. And I think the first thing anyone and everyone can do is to learn the truth, is to just, go searching yourself. I mean, I don't even tell people, what to think or how to think, but, read and examine. And we live in an era of information. Now, there's a lot of gatekeepers even on digital information, but it's still better than the way it used to be when all we had were newspapers and so I would say read Palestinian voices, read our work, read what we say and hear what we say, and use your own critical thinking skills. And I don't know what the environment, the political environment is for you guys, but I know everywhere in the world there are Palestinian solidarity movements, and people have a different tolerance for different actions, and that's a very personal decision, I think, for people to make. But reading stories is always, for me, it is it's a space where I grow as a human being, and it is literature is just a foundational component of my life, my thought process, my growth as a human being, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically.
And yeah, thank you very much. I'm very happy that we have now Mornings in Dženinu in Slovenian. I read it in English, and I hope that it's not going to be the last of your books in Slovenian, because it's actually one of the novels, and I'm not a crier. I don't cry often, but this book made me cry. So, and I think it's very true what you write or what you say, that literature for sure, or the literature you write helps us find humans in us, but also in everybody else. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for everybody for coming.
Good luck.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.